My name is Lucas Bennett, and when I turned 26, my family showed me exactly how much they thought I was worth. A worn-out pocket watch. On that warm July afternoon in Willowbrook, a picturesque town nestled between green rolling hills and expansive apple orchards, I stood in front of our large family home, celebrating the completion of my medical residency. The gathering was festive. Balloons floated gently in the breeze, and laughter echoed from the sprawling garden filled with relatives and friends. My older sister, Olivia, had celebrated her graduation from law school 2 years earlier. Our parents had rewarded her achievement with a lavish penthouse apartment right in the heart of Boston. The place was stunning. Panoramic city views, marble countertops, floor-to-ceiling windows, the kind of home that screamed success and prestige. Now it was my turn. Standing in my neatly pressed suit, I couldn't help but hope for acknowledgement, just a small sign that they saw me, truly saw me. Dad stepped forward, tapping his champagne glass with a fork to draw everyone's attention. His speech began as expected, praising Olivia's recent promotion to senior associate at a prestigious law firm, each word a glowing tribute to her brilliance and dedication. Finally, he turned to me, lifting his glass slightly. "And Lucas," he paused, clearly searching for something meaningful. "Good job, son." His tone lacked warmth, a mere formality that fell flat against the murmurs of polite applause. My heart sank, but I managed a faint smile. My mother approached, her expression artificially bright, holding a small, worn velvet box. "We got you something symbolic," she said, handing it over. The box felt strangely heavy in my palm. I opened it slowly to reveal an old pocket watch, tarnished silver with a cracked face. My grandfather's watch. He had been a man of many failures, and somehow this was my inheritance. "It represents history," she added hastily, sensing my confusion. "You know, possibility if you repair it." The silence that followed was deafening, broken only by Olivia's quiet chuckle, hidden behind a sip of champagne. I felt eyes piercing me from every direction. Swallowing the lump in my throat, I muttered a subdued, "Thanks," slipping the box into my jacket pocket, feeling its weight drag heavily against my chest. It wasn't just a watch. It felt like their judgment of my worth, a stark reminder that in their eyes I was still not enough. That evening, I didn't return to the family mansion. Instead, I headed to my modest apartment downtown, above a small bookstore. This place was my sanctuary, financed through exhausting hours at the hospital and moonlighting at a community clinic. The watch, a bitter token of disappointment, was shoved into a drawer beside old letters and medical textbooks, soon forgotten under the pressures of everyday survival. Family gatherings afterward felt increasingly hollow. Conversations revolved endlessly around Olivia's new cases, her glamorous life, and extravagant vacations. Whenever my life came up, their interest was superficial, fleeting. It was painfully clear. I was invisible, overshadowed by my sister's sparkling achievements. Months passed, blending into a haze of relentless shifts at the hospital. My confidence dwindled. Gradually, a dark thought crept into my mind. Perhaps they were right. Maybe Olivia truly was superior. My ambitions began to shrink, and I found myself retreating inward, feeling smaller with each passing day. Desperate for validation, or at least for someone to hear me, I began visiting Dr. Eleanor Hart, a gentle yet insightful therapist whose office overlooked the serene Willowbrook River. Her guidance became a lifeline, helping me cling to a sliver of self-worth amidst the chaos of doubt and familial neglect. Nearly a year later, on a rainy Sunday afternoon, fate intervened. Cleaning out my cluttered drawer, I rediscovered the forgotten pocket watch. On a whim, I inspected it more closely. The cracked face revealed an engraving I had never noticed before. Curious, I typed the obscure inscription into an online search, and what appeared on my screen made my breath catch. The watch wasn't worthless. In fact, it was rare, a collector's item valued at millions. As shock numbed my limbs, a wild, uncontrollable laugh escaped my lips, mingling with tears of disbelief and vindication. The watch, this broken, tarnished token of their disdain, was suddenly my ticket to unimaginable freedom and the perfect way to rewrite my story. The next morning found me pacing the scuffed hardwood floor of my apartment, the pocket watch ticking on the table like a metronome counting down to a new life. My thoughts raced in dizzy circles, how to protect this windfall, how to keep my family's claws from finding it, how to turn it into something meaningful. I dialed Marissa Quinn at dawn, my voice still raw with disbelief. She answered after the second ring, her tone crisp and alert despite the early hour, and agreed to meet within 2 hours. No assistance, no delay, complete confidentiality. Marissa's office occupied the top floor of an understated sandstone building overlooking Willowbrook's historic market square. Inside, everything exuded quiet power. Matte black fixtures, floor-to-ceiling bookshelves lined with leather-bound volumes on finance and ethics, and a single abstract painting in hues of indigo that seemed to drink in the morning light. She greeted me with a firm handshake and dark, inquisitive eyes that missed nothing. I laid out the entire tale, starting with a humiliating graduation, the years of invisibility, the watch, and the staggering appraisal that had knocked the wind from my lungs the night before. She listened without interruption, occasionally jotting bullet point notes in a slim notebook. When I finished, she closed the cover with deliberate care and leaned forward. "Lucas," she said, pronouncing each syllable like a verdict. "This is not merely newfound wealth. It is leverage, narrative, autonomy. We will cloak you in silence first, and then we will build." Her plan unfurled with surgical precision. Within 48 hours, we formed the Sutton Bennett Heritage Trust, named for 2 obscure family surnames, impossible to trace back to me. A separate limited liability company handled auction logistics, and an ironclad non-disclosure agreement bound every professional who so much as glanced at the paperwork. Authentication required expert testimony. Marissa flew in Professor Edmund Carlisle, a horological historian renowned for unmasking forgeries. Under museum-grade lights, he inspected the engraving, dismantled the movement, and declared the watch an 18th-century prototype crafted by a master London watchmaker, one of only 3 ever produced, the last known example lost in a shipwreck off Cornwall. Its value, he said, easily breached 8 figures. His written certificate, embossed with the seal of the Royal Horological Society, transformed conjecture into undeniable fact. Within a fortnight, discreet bidding erupted among private collectors in Zurich, Hong Kong, and Montreal. Marissa brokered the sale through a sealed bid process, ensuring no buyer ever learned my name. On a rain-swept Thursday, the winning offer, 37 million sterling, roughly $52 million, cleared into the trust's account. The numbers appeared on my secure banking portal in elegant serif font, and my knees actually buckled. I pressed my palm against the window, watching water race down the glass, and whispered a stunned prayer of gratitude. Freedom, however, begged for a purpose. Guided by Marissa's strategic mind and Dr. Hart's steady counsel, I carved out 3 pillars for the fortune. First, I erased every cent of my medical school debt and settled the modest mortgage on my apartment. Second, I allocated $10 million to a low-profile investment portfolio, diversified across green infrastructure bonds, pioneering biotech firms, and community credit unions to guarantee perpetual funding. Third, and dearest to my heart, I established the Bennett Health Foundation, a not-for-profit clinic and research hub designed to offer comprehensive care, dental, mental, and primary, to families earning below the poverty line. Construction began on a donated tract of land at the eastern edge of Willowbrook, once an abandoned textile mill lot. I spent evenings with architects, debating warm brick versus recycled glass facades, insisting on sunlit atriums and rooftop gardens where patients could breathe fresh air between treatments. Each blueprint revision felt like stitching a new layer onto my once tattered sense of self-worth. Throughout these whirlwind weeks, I moved quietly, dressing in the same worn scrubs for hospital shifts, driving my aging hatchback, answering my parents' perfunctory texts with brief, non-committal replies. Yet whispers started anyway. The antique watch dealer spotted in town, the sudden interest in a derelict lot, a colleague's accidental glimpse of an architectural rendering labeled BHF. Willowbrook thrives on gossip. Secrets are seeds that sprout overnight. I could feel the storm gathering on the horizon, and somewhere deep inside, beneath the new confidence and purpose, smoldered a spark of anticipation. The reckoning with my family was no longer a question of if, but when, and I vowed I would be ready when that day arrived. Whispers travel faster than summer wind in Willowbrook, and within a fortnight the first tremors reached Maple Crest, my parents' expansive ivy-clad estate on the western ridge. It began innocently enough. Aunt Harriet spotted scaffolding at the abandoned textile lot and mentioned over tea that someone was pouring quite the fortune into a charity clinic. By the time the comment completed its circuit through bridge club gossip and Sunday choir chatter, the story had swollen. Mysterious benefactors, millions changing hands, a secret philanthropist said to drive an aging hatchback. My mother, Isabel, rang me thrice in 24 hours, leaving syrup-sweet voicemails dripping with curiosity thinly veiled as concern. I let each call lapse into silence, the little red notification badge on my phone a pulsing reminder of the reckoning to come. While rumors fermented, real bricks and mortar rose. Each dawn before my hospital shift, I walked the muddy perimeter of the Bennett Health Foundation site with Elias Moreno, a grizzled project manager whose father had once run the looms in the old mill. We argued amiably over reclaimed brick versus sustainably harvested cedar, over skylights placed to flood pediatric exam rooms with gentle morning light. One humid Tuesday, we buried a time capsule beneath the reception foyer. Inside, a stethoscope from my first residency rotation, a crayon drawing donated by a 5-year-old asthma patient, and a single typed line that read, "Dignity is the first. Medicine." Watching the concrete pour, I felt a piece of my past finally take root in something solid and life-giving. Back at Memorial Hospital, the shifts grew heavier as summer storms rolled across the county. One night, paramedics wheeled in a teenager named Damien who had collapsed on the soccer field. His mother clutched my arm, eyes wild with fear, confessing she had no insurance and less than $50 in her checking account. I ordered every necessary test without hesitation, quietly signing the billing form with the Foundation's provisional account number. When the MRI revealed a congenital heart defect treatable with surgery, relief crashed over us both like a tidal wave. Damien's gratitude, the way his voice cracked whispering "Thank you, Dr. Bennett," was worth more than all $52 million sitting in distant spreadsheets. Late that same evening, rain drumming against my apartment windows, I opened my mailbox to find a cream-colored envelope embossed with our family crest. Inside lay an invitation to Sunday brunch, just the immediate family, handwritten in my mother's looping script, as though formality could mask intent. My phone lit up again. 14 missed calls, 7 messages, one from Olivia marked urgent. I stared at the screen until the numbers blurred, then dialed Marissa. We spoke for nearly an hour, mapping contingencies like military strategists, legal firewalls, press statements, emotional boundaries. Finally, I booked a single seat on the early train to Maple Crest. The battlefield was set. This time I would not arrive unarmed with hope alone, but fortified by purpose, truth, and the quiet power of knowing exactly who I had become. Sunday dawned beneath a sky the color of pewter, low clouds pressing against the hills like a warning. I boarded the 605 to Maple Crest, clutching a leather folio. Inside, Foundation brochures, audited statements, and the certified sale deed of the pocket watch. Proof, if needed, that every decision I had made since that humiliating July had been mine alone. The carriage was almost empty, its windows fogged by early morning chill. As the train rattled past apple orchards and sleepy hamlets, memories unspooled, childhood summers chasing fireflies behind the carriage house, Olivia winning every debate at the dinner table, while I learned to swallow my words like bitter pills. I pressed my forehead to the glass, letting the rhythmic clatter of wheels steady my pulse. Maple Crest appeared at the top of the ridge, a silhouette of gables and chimneys wreathed in creeping ivy. The gravel driveway glittered with yesterday's rain as I walked toward the house, each step crunching like distant thunder. Mother opened the door before I could knock, perfume already wafting into the damp air. "Lucas, darling, you made it," she cooed, kissing both cheeks with practiced grace. Behind her, the foyer gleamed. Polished mahogany floors, crystal chandeliers, portraits of stern ancestors whose gazes weighed judgment upon every visitor. Brunch was staged in the solarium. Sunlight filtered through leaded panes onto a table laden with silver domes and linen so white it seemed almost blue. Father stood at the head, impeccably attired, a huntsman jacket hugging his broad shoulders. Olivia lounged nearby, scrolling her phone, an emerald ring flashing each time her thumb flicked the screen. No mention was made of my late reply, only airy complaints about the humidity and the scarcity of good help nowadays. Yet beneath the pleasantries, tension hummed like live wire. I felt their eyes assess my off-the-rack suit, the scuffed briefcase, hunting for clues to the rumors swirling beyond their manicured hedges. As plates of smoked salmon and herbs were served, conversation turned, predictably, to Olivia's firm, courting an international client, to Father's upcoming keynote at a philanthropic summit. I waited, sipping black coffee, until the lull arrived. "I have some news," I said, voice calm, the room's quiet instantly sharpening. Mother's smile stretched, brittle as sugar glass. "We hoped you might," she breathed. I began with the clinic, how construction was halfway completed, how partnerships with the regional hospital ensured sustainable staffing, how community outreach had already secured volunteer commitments from over 300 residents. I spoke of Damien's life-saving surgery funded through the foundation and of a mobile immunization unit scheduled to roll out by spring. My parents exchanged puzzled glances, unsure whether to celebrate or question. Olivia interrupted, tone light but eyes sharp. "That sounds admirable, Lucas, but clinics require capital. Where exactly did you—" Footsteps interrupted her. Our longtime housekeeper, Rosa, entered carrying a silver tray bearing a single envelope. "Special delivery, Senora," she murmured. Mother accepted it, frowning at the unfamiliar wax seal, the insignia of the Sutton Bennett Heritage Trust. She slid out a parchment note, reading silently. As her eyes widened, color drained from her face. Father took the letter, his brow furrowing deeper with each line. Olivia leaned forward, curiosity morphing into disbelief. The note was simple, a notification of a charitable endowment, $8 million earmarked for the Bennett Health Foundation, funds already transferred from the watch sales escrow account. It bore my discreet digital signature. Silence draped the solarium like a heavy velvet curtain. I folded my hands on the table, meeting each stunned gaze without flinching. Outside, the first raindrops tapped the glass roof, soft but insistent, as though heralding the storm still to come. Rain intensified, drumming a steady cadence on the glass ceiling as tension thickened inside the sun-drenched room. Father was the first to speak, voice low, each word clipped with barely leashed control. $8 million, he repeated, as though tasting something bitter. From a trust bearing your middle name. Care to explain, Lucas? His gaze fixed on mine, a mix of curiosity and reprimand, the look he once reserved for boardroom adversaries who dared to outmaneuver him. I opened my folio and slid across the audited statements, followed by Professor Carlyle's authentication of the pocket watch and the notarized bill of sale. Pages glided over linen like cards in a magician's flourish, each one a silent rebuttal to every slight, every dismissal. "The watch you gave me," I said evenly, "was an 18th century prototype. It sold for over $52 million 3 months ago. I invested wisely, structured the trust, and seeded the Bennett Health Foundation. We'll open our doors by next winter solstice." Mother's hand flew to her throat, pearls clacking as they settled. "Lucas, darling, why didn't you come to us? We could have guided you, safeguarded." Her voice cracked, sincerity wrestling with years of condescension. Olivia scoffed, emerald ring sparkling as she folded her arms. "A clinic? All that capital for free checkups? Think of the returns you're forfeiting." She spoke the language of dividends and mergers, unaware her words were arrows bouncing harmlessly off newly forged armor. I leaned back, letting the silence stretch. Outside, lightning forked across the graying sky, illuminating the garden in stark silver. "Returns?" I echoed softly. "Damien now has a future. Children will receive vaccinations their parents could never afford. A returning veteran will get therapy without drowning in paperwork. Those are my returns." Father exhaled sharply, frustration sharpening the line of his jaw. "You're throwing away generational wealth out of spite." He tried to stand, but the weight of revelation pushed him back into his chair. "You owe this family transparency." The statement hung in the humid air. I felt something inside me settle, like a bone finally clicking into place. "Transparency?" My voice remained calm, yet each syllable carried the thunder's echo. I owed this family honesty, support, love. What I received was a broken heirloom handed off like an afterthought. The watch became my mirror, reflecting who we were. Now it funds who I choose to become. Mother reached across the table, manicured fingers trembling. "Lucas, please." We were wrong. Let us make amends. Olivia's wedding is in 6 months. The expenses are overwhelming. Help us, and we'll celebrate your foundation publicly. There it was, the hook beneath the apology. I closed my folio and stood. The foundation needs no applause, and my help has been given to those who need it, not those who covet it. I slid one final document forward, an invitation to the clinic's inaugural gala scheduled for the 1st of May, seats reserved but unrequired. Attend if you wish to witness what compassion builds. Stay home if you prefer marble countertops and balance sheets. Either choice is yours alone. Thunder cracked overhead as I buttoned my coat. Olivia's lips parted, a retort dying unspoken. Father stared at the garden, jaw clenched. Mother's eyes shone with unshed tears, though whether of regret or wounded pride I could not tell. I walked to the foyer, Rosa waiting with my umbrella, her warm gaze a silent blessing. As I stepped onto the gravel drive, the rain cooled my heated skin, each droplet a baptism. Behind me, Maple Crest loomed, a monument to a history that no longer defined me. Ahead, the descending path curved toward the train station, slick and gleaming. I tightened my grip on the umbrella handle, breathed in petrichor, and started down, feeling lighter with every measured stride toward the life I had chosen for myself and for all those still waiting to be seen. I arrived back in Willowbrook just past dusk, the town's antique street lamps spilling pools of amber light onto rain-slick cobblestones. Instead of heading straight to my apartment, I detoured toward the construction site, driven by an ache to see tangible proof that my choices still stood after the day's emotional siege. The gate was unlocked for the night crew, electricians running conduit lines through the skeletal hallways. Floodlights cast the half-finished facade in stark relief. Red reclaimed brick rising 3 stories, ribbon windows awaiting tempered panes. The steel skeleton of the rooftop greenhouse silhouetted against clouds still flickering with distant lightning. Elias Moreno met me just inside the foyer. Work boots caked with mud, neon vest streaked with concrete dust. "Storm slowed us, but we hit today's poor target," he reported, voice a gravelly whisper so as not to disturb the echoing space. He guided me along plywood walkways above trenches for plumbing and data cables. In the pediatric wing, fresh drywall curved into soft alcoves where reading nooks would soon blossom. In the mental health suite, sound-dampening panels lay in neat stacks, waiting to hush the anxieties they would one day shelter. I trailed my fingers over the cool metal handrail of the grand stair, imagining children racing up it toward rooftop sunlight, parents exhaling relief in the cafe below. When we emerged onto the roof deck, the rain had stopped. Low clouds shredded themselves against a waxing moon, revealing shimmered stars. Elias lit a thermos of coffee on a portable burner. The aroma mingled with petrichor in a way that felt almost holy. We spoke of timelines, interior finishes by November, equipment installation through January, staff onboarding beginning in early February. Each milestone he cited landed in my chest like a heartbeat, steady and sure. But beneath the satisfaction pulsed fresh unease. I told Elias in broad strokes about brunch at Maple Crest. He listened, then placed his broad, calloused hand on my shoulder. "Families who clutch their worth with both fists rarely understand when someone chooses to open their hands instead," he said. "Don't let their fear shrink your vision." Simple words, yet they cleared a stubborn fog of doubt that had followed me from the train. Leaving the site near midnight, I walked the river path toward home. Willowbrook slept, windows dark save for the soft glow of late-night readers and newborn parents. Halfway across the stone footbridge, my phone buzzed, a new email from Dr. Hart, subject line debrief. She anticipated my need before I could frame it myself. A session booked for Monday evening, her message closing with a single sentence typed in her gentle serif font. "Remember, identity is reclaimed in layers. Today peeled back another one." I pocketed the device and paused at the bridge's apex. The river below swelled with rain runoff, its surface wrinkling moonlight into silver ribbons. I thought of Damien, his second post-operative checkup scheduled for Tuesday, of Mrs. Alvarez, the diabetic grandmother whose foot we had saved from amputation by fast-tracking her to a vascular specialist, of the thousands more who would step through the foundation's yet unfinished doors. Their stories felt like threads, weaving themselves around the hurt still raw from childhood, forming something stronger than the loneliness that once defined me. When I finally reached my apartment, exhaustion settled over me like a heavy quilt, but sleep did not come easily. An hour before dawn, an alert flashed on my laptop. A local journalist, Emily Rowan of the Willowbrook Herald, requesting comment on persistent rumors of a clandestine benefactor financing the Bennett Health Foundation. She had attached a photo, me, exiting the construction site earlier, grainy but recognizable. My pulse hitched, not with fear, but with a sudden clarity of purpose. The gala in May would be my chosen stage. Until then, the work needed no spotlight. I drafted a polite decline, citing privacy and focus on completion, and scheduled it for automatic send at 7 o'clock. As the first morning birds began to sing, I finally closed my eyes, the image of starlight on new brick etched behind my eyelids. Somewhere across town, fathers and mothers would soon wake to prepare breakfasts they barely could afford, unaware that a place built from one discarded heirloom and a lifetime of overlooked worth was rising for them. The thought eased me into dreamless rest, readying me for the battles and breakthroughs the next day would undoubtedly bring. Monday unfolded with the deceptive calm of a pane of glass just before it shatters. I rose late, brewed dark roast strong enough to wake the dead, then walked to Dr. Hart's office beneath a sky the color of bleached bone. Her study smelled of sandalwood and old paper. We unpacked the weekend, the rain-soaked confrontation, the 8 million revelation, the quiet triumph. She asked what emotion lingered strongest. Relief, I answered, surprised by my own certainty. Not pride, not anger. Relief that the truth had at last found daylight. Her gentle nod felt like permission to inhale fully for the first time in years. Leaving the session, I found 2 missed calls from Emily Rowan and a curt text from Olivia. We need to talk. Sibling urgency was rarer than comet sightings. Nonetheless, I silenced the phone. At the hospital, my final shift roster had been posted. 3 weeks left before transitioning full-time to the foundation. Colleagues offered congratulations in hallway huddles, unaware of the fortune fueling my new path. I stitched lacerations, adjusted medications, and scheduled follow-ups with the quiet satisfaction of tying loose narrative threads. That evening, as sunset bled copper across the river, Olivia appeared unannounced at my apartment door. Gone was her courtroom polish. She wore jeans, a rain jacket, eyes rimmed red from either tears or sleeplessness. I let her in, tension crackling like static between us. She wasted no time. Father planned to contest the trust, claiming family ownership of the watch had never legally transferred. His corporate attorneys were drafting motions. Mother, meanwhile, had started leaking hints to society friends, painting herself as heartbroken by my secret life. And Olivia, she offered this intel not as blackmail, but as olive branch. I don't want your money, she said, voice hoarse. I want out of the crossfire. You deserve what you built. Help me make them stand down. The plea was genuine, yet layered with self-preservation. I poured her chamomile, then opened my laptop and displayed scanned provenance papers. The velvet box inscription documenting the watch as my graduation gift, signed in Mother's hand. The sales contract, notarized and stamped. They can rattle sabers, I said softly. The law favors recorded intent. Olivia studied the documents, shoulders sagging with weary acceptance. They won't stop, she whispered. It's never about the object, only control. Control. The word hummed like a struck tuning fork. I realized then the next battle would not be fought in court filings, but in public perception. If I remained a shadow, my parents' narrative might take root. Ungrateful son, reckless fortune, vanity project. But stepping into the light required strategy. After Olivia left, chamomile untouched, I phoned Marissa. We convened a virtual meeting with Maya Lark, a crisis communications savant known for shepherding whistleblowers and philanthropists alike through media maelstroms. Maya's voice was brisk, compass steady. We will own the story before someone else writes it, she declared. The plan. a controlled feature with Emily Rowan timed 1 week before the gala, exclusive photos inside the nearly finished clinic, testimonials from patients already helped under foundation vouchers, pure transparency stripped of melodrama. By midnight, press packets and embargo agreements were drafted. I approved a single portrait, me in plain scrubs beneath unfinished steel beams, sky visible through rafters, to accompany the article. Maya insisted. Authenticity disarms speculation faster than denial. I closed my laptop, mind thrumming with both dread and exhilaration. Outside, spring peepers chorused by the riverbank, their relentless song a reminder that emergence, though loud, is the right of every creature that has survived the dark. Before bed, I penned an email to Damien's mother, confirming his post-operative physical therapy would be covered through high school. Her reply arrived within minutes, a string of tearful emojis followed by 3 words that glowed brighter than any balance sheet. You saved us. I shut off the screen and let those words echo in the quiet room. Whatever storm my parents summoned, it would break against the seawall of people whose lives were already turning on new hinges. And that, I thought as sleep finally claimed me, was a currency no inheritance could ever counterfeit. The week that followed unfurled, with the unrelenting tempo of a pressurized valve finally released. On Wednesday at dawn, Emily Rowan met me at the construction site, camera slung over her shoulder, notepad already brimming with preliminary research. Hard hat in place, I guided her through echoing corridors that smelled of fresh timber and concrete dust, recounting every decision, from low VOC paints to solar panel arrays. Each choice rooted in dignity for patients who too often breathed last on. The margins. She spoke little, recording my words, clicking photos of unfinished rooms where sunbeams slanted through girders onto plywood floors like prophecies of future warmth. In the pediatric wing, a mason paused to ask if we might use sea blue tiles instead of sterile white. Emily captured the moment, noting how decision-making trickled upward from listening, not dictating. After the tour, we drove to Willowbrook Memorial to meet Damien during physical therapy. The boy, cheeks still round with adolescence, pedaled a resistance bike while recounting his plan to join the school robotics club once cleared by his cardiologist. His mother watched, hands clasped, tears threatening. Emily's lens froze that tremulous hope in a single frame that would later headline her piece. We continued to the Riverfront Community Hall where volunteers assembled hygiene kits for uninsured families. Retirees, teenagers, former patients, all working side by side, offered anecdotes of how a voucher from the still unfinished foundation had intercepted despair, insulin supplied in time, prenatal vitamins delivered without bureaucracy, an emergency, dental extraction that spared a father weeks of agony. By sunset, Emily's memory cards were full, her questions sharpened. She asked about my parents. I offered a careful truth. They value legacy built on granite. I value legacy built on breath. She scribbled, then closed her notebook with a soft click, promise of balance in her forthcoming narrative. That night, Marissa alerted me that father's attorneys had filed an emergency injunction to freeze trust assets, arguing fraudulent misrepresentation in the watch sale. Though quickly dismissed by the probate judge due to incontrovertible gift documentation, the maneuver signaled escalation. Maya Lark responded with elegant ferocity, emailing father's counsel a pre-publication copy of Emily's story, granting them 48 hours to issue any factual corrections. It was a subtle, legal chess move, transparency as checkmate. Public perception would soon crystallize, and any further aggression risked painting them as predators gnawing at altruism. On Friday evening, I returned to the site for the ritual walk-through with Elias. Rain had lifted, leaving the air spiced with wet earth and budding lilac. In the future oncology suite, drywallers had carved round portals for LED skylights programmed to mimic dawn light cycles, small mercies for patients whose days blurred under chemotherapy. We paused by a window cutout framing Willowbrook's steepled skyline. Elias broke the silence. Storms rolling off for now, Doc. Foundations, literal or otherwise, are meant for weather. I nodded, grateful for his constancy. Back home, a single text blinked from Mother. Please call. It is urgent. Heart steady, I typed a measured reply. My counsel advises written correspondence only. Wishing you well. I set the phone face down. The old reflex to appease had withered. In its place grew a stillness, sturdy as oak. Before bed, I reread the opening paragraph of Emily's draft. One gifted pocket watch ticked away a young doctor's sense of worth, until he turned its time into everyone else's second chance. The sentence glowed against the night mode screen like a lighthouse beacon. Tomorrow, the town would wake to this story. By Monday, the region. By gala night, perhaps the country. Whatever echoes reached Maple Crest, they would be of my own making, composed not of bitter reprisals, but of pulse oximeters beeping steady and lives briskly, beautifully continuing. The morning Emily's article went live, Willowbrook stirred as if awakened by a collective gasp. Breakfast cafes swapped gossip for headlines. Phones pinged with push notifications. The Herald's website crashed twice under traffic it had never seen. Her lead photo, Damien pedaling under my watchful eye, beams and rafters soaring overhead, splashed across social feeds, captioned, "The doctor who turned time into mercy." Within hours, emails flooded the Foundation's provisional inbox. Retired nurses volunteering, construction suppliers offering eco-friendly materials at cost, an anonymous donor pledging $500,000 toward the oncology skylights. Marissa's office rang off the hook. By noon, she had cataloged over $2 million in new commitments, each vetted to avoid entanglements that might threaten the clinic's mission. Public fervor brought scrutiny, too. Reporters from Boston, Providence, even the Chronicle in San Francisco requested interviews. Maya's team triaged, prioritizing outlets willing to foreground healthcare equity over sensational inheritance drama. Under her guidance, I recorded a single video statement inside the skeletal atrium. No script, just truth. I spoke of patients whose coughs turned fatal for lack of antibiotics, of my own brush with invisibility, of how dignity should never rely on luck. The clip circulated widely, shared by medical associations and local churches alike, its view count climbing into 6 figures before nightfall. That same evening, the Mintwood Country Club hosted its spring gala. Decor gleamed, but conversation curdled. Mother's friends, lacquered in silk, dissected the article, some praising bravery, others clucking at family airs aired. Mother reportedly left early, face pale but composed. Olivia texted, "They're reeling. Father furious. Might try another injunction." Maya responded by forwarding the legal team a montage of community testimonials already uploaded to the Foundation's site, each timestamp reinforcing public support like layers of indemnity. Saturday at dawn, I stood again on the rooftop deck beside Elias. Overnight, volunteers had planted seedlings in the greenhouse boxes, basil, lavender, cherry tomatoes, leaving handwritten tags for the first patient potluck. Sunlight caught dew on tender leaves, and for a heartbeat, I imagined the finished space buzzing with laughter, the scent of herbs mingling with hospital-grade antiseptic, a juxtaposition of renewal and resilience. Footsteps echoed from the stairwell. Turning, I met my father's silhouette, charcoal coat flapping in the brisk wind. He had come alone. Lines of fatigue scored deeper into his face than I remembered, as if anger were an acid slowly etching away marble. For a long moment, we simply studied each other amid steel and sky. "I had to see it," he said finally, voice sanded rough. "The article. Your mother couldn't breathe for shame." He gestured toward the rising walls. All of this from that damned watch." The words held both awe and resentment, alloyed inseparably. I led him along the catwalk, pointing out the oncology skylights, the birthing suite designed with dimmable amber lights to calm anxious mothers. He listened, silent but attentive, fingers brushing unfinished railings as if testing their resolve. At the pediatric recovery garden, he stopped beneath an arch, ready for vines. "You really believe you can fix the world with charity?" he asked. I met his gaze square on. "Not the world, but this corner of it. And maybe the children who grow here will fix the next." The simplicity silenced debate. He exhaled a breath that sounded almost like surrender. Before leaving, he drew a small envelope from his coat pocket. No crest, no wax seal, containing a single page, a formal withdrawal of his latest motion, signed and notarized. "I won't stand in your way," he said, turning back toward the stairwell. I can't promise more than that. It wasn't contrition, but it was a ceasefire. And in the calculus of legacy, Sometimes absence of harm is its own mercy. As his footsteps faded, Elias emerged from a doorway, eyebrows raised. I tucked the envelope into my jacket, heart steady. The sun had climbed higher, gilding the greenhouse glass. Below, volunteers began to arrive, their laughter floating upward on warming air. I returned to work, fortified by a new silence, one not of exclusion, but of space cleared for seeds to take root, undisturbed by storm clouds now retreating beyond the horizon. April slipped toward its midpoint like silk through a clenched fist, and the Bennett Health Foundation hummed with finishing touches. Painters in white overalls floated down corridors, laying final coats of sage and pale sand. Information tech teams threaded fiber cables at dawn, their flashlights cutting constellations in the dim. Every dusk found me in the rooftop greenhouse, coaxing seedlings taller, rehearsing the gala speech under my breath while the town below fried its supper fish and tucked children into beds. Donations now totaled nearly $12 million, each pledge accompanied by a story scribbled in the memo line. For my wife, who died waiting for chemo. For the daughter I almost lost to asthma. Their collective weight felt at once immense and strangely buoyant, as though grief itself were lifting the clinic toward completion. One crisp Wednesday, the staff orientation began in the still echoing atrium. 30 new hires, nurse practitioners, therapists, nutritionists, interpreters fluent in Arabic, Haitian Creole, and Lakota, clustered in folding chairs, steam from takeout coffee rising like early fog. I addressed them beneath the uninstalled chandelier, speaking of agency, of meeting patients at eye level, of how the difference between charity and dignity is participation. When I finished, applause filled the space with warm thunder. Later, walking among them as badges were handed out, I saw the mosaic our hiring team had crafted, seasoned clinicians side by side with recent community college graduates, every face lit by the same steady flame. That evening, as I locked the glass front doors, I noticed a figure standing on the sidewalk, clutching a paper bag spotted dark with rain. My mother. She looked smaller than memory, her posture robbed of its usual arching confidence. For a beat, we stared through the door's reflection, two versions of a family history suspended in the glow of security lights. I opened the door, and she stepped inside, eyes sweeping over reception desks still wrapped in protective plastic, the echoing hush that reminded her of empty cathedrals. From the bag, she produced a stack of hand-stitched quilts, pastel triangles pieced together by the women's guild she had chaired for nearly 20 years. "We thought the pediatric ward might need warmth," she murmured, voice thin. No apology, no tears, just an offering laid gently on the nearest gurney. I thanked her, simplicity shielding us both from words too fragile to survive the air. She touched my cheek, a gesture not of possession but of recognition, and left before the silence grew heavy enough to break. News of her visit did not travel. Gossip chose juicier morsels. Instead, what filtered into conversation was the clinic's progress. Parents pointed it out during Sunday drives. Children counted its stories from school bus windows, and the old fisherman who rose before dawn to cast lines in the Willowbrook River now debated the merits of solar arrays over diesel generators. The town had taken partial ownership, and nothing delighted me more than overhearing them say our clinic when they thought I was out of earshot. On the 20th of April, Emily Rowan sent a final email, her follow-up piece ready to publish the morning after the gala, embargoed photos attached. One image froze me. The greenhouse at golden hour, seedlings yawning toward sunset while my silhouette adjusted a trellis. Beneath it, her caption read, "Where once he was unseen, he now cultivates the visible miracles of everyday health." I closed the laptop, heart hammering with something beyond pride, responsibility perhaps, or the sharp edge of impending culmination. In 10 days' time, the doors would open, violins would swell, and lives would pivot on newly greased hinges. I inhaled, tasting lilac on the night air seeping through a cracked window, and let the quiet promise itself to me. No matter the noise of legacy or the whispers of regret, tomorrow would come, and with it, the steady heartbeat of a place built to keep time on humanity's side. The final week before the gala arrived with the tremble of a held-breath violin string, and every hour felt stitched with electric thread. Monday's dawn spilled apricot light through the atrium's new skylights, scattering color over polished terrazzo floors that still smelled faintly of curing sealant. Delivery trucks rumbled in and out like tides, ergonomic birthing beds, low-radiation X-ray panels, a gleaming bank of dialysis machines whose hum sounded to my ears like distant beehives promising life. Volunteers fluttered at every turn. Retired carpenters hanging directional signage, high school artists stenciling gentle constellations above the pediatric beds, a widowed florist weaving ivy garlands along the grand stair. Watching them, I felt the improbable symmetry of our stories, each carrying a small fracture the world had dealt, each setting that fracture like kintsugi into something stronger. Yet outside our walls, rumblings persisted. On Wednesday, a tabloid blog splashed a headline, "Lottery Myth or Vanity Temple," claiming I had cheated Willowbrook's generosity by weaponizing pity. Maya neutralized the flare within hours, releasing a transparent financial dashboard that mapped every incoming dollar against each ordered scalpel. Still, the smear left a residue of unease, like smoke that lingers long after a match is snuffed. That night, I stood alone in the rooftop greenhouse, rain drumming the panes, and reminded myself that faith is not an unblemished surface, but a muscle that tears in microthreads each time it lifts weight, only to rebuild itself stronger. Thursday brought a quieter tremor. Olivia arrived unannounced during a fire alarm inspection, her fiancé, Grant, trailing behind with shoulders drawn tight as bridge cables. She pulled me aside, away from the clatter of sprinkler line tests, and pressed into my hand a slim thumb drive. Inside, she said, were corporate emails proving our father's legal team had contemplated a smear campaign far uglier than the tabloid piece, one they ultimately shelved after public sentiment swung so fiercely in the clinic's favor. "You should know how close it came," she whispered, eyes glossy but unbroken. Grant offered a curt nod of solidarity, as if his presence itself were confession that loyalty could, at last, choose merit over blood. I thanked them, quietly filing the drive in a lockbox beside the first seed packet ever planted here, basil, hope green, and impossible to silence. As the sun dipped behind willow-draped hills on Friday, we rehearsed the gala program under the atrium's crystal chandelier, now suspended like a frozen constellation overhead. The string quartet tuned to A4, servers practiced sweeping arcs with empty trays, and I walked the length of the stage, my palms memorizing each wood grain. When rehearsal ended, I remained alone in the hush, picturing chairs filled, breaths held, futures tilting. I thought of Damien sprinting across his school gym, of his mother's voicemail. "He ran a full lap, doctor, no stops." I thought of my younger self, hands shaking around a tarnished pocket watch, longing to be seen. The memory no longer stung. It glowed, warm as embers repurposed to light the next traveler's way. Near midnight, a final email pinged from Emily Rowan, a single-line reminder that the follow-up story would publish at dawn after the gala. Headline already set, "When Time Becomes Medicine." I closed the laptop and stepped onto the front terrace. Below, the river whispered against its banks, and street lamps painted gilt halos on the water. Somewhere beyond town, Maple Crest's windows would be dark, my parents perhaps lying awake with thoughts they had no words for. I let a breath fog into the cool air and made a quiet vow. Tomorrow I would turn every gaze that had once appraised my worth toward the faces of those this place would serve. And when the last violin note faded, the true music would begin, heartbeats renovated, lungs reclaimed, newborn cries echoing in hallways built to cradle possibility. The clock above the reception desk chimed midnight. 12 soft bells, each one a promise. I locked the glass doors, feeling neither visitor nor exile but steward, and walked home under a moon bright as a newly polished coin, ready to buy morning from the night. Gala day dawned with skies so clear they felt rinsed, each cumulus cloud a single, slow-moving spectator. By 6 o'clock, the foundation glowed, literally solar panels catching first light. Interior LEDs cycling through a gentle sunrise program that bathed corridors in honeyed gold. Volunteers swept the entrance plaza, scattering petals of wild lupine and chamomile gathered from nearby meadows. The scent mingled with fresh varnish and something intangible, a collective hum of nerves and hope. At 8 sharp, the inaugural patients arrived, chosen not for symbolism, but by clinic schedule necessity. An elderly farmer named Samuel, whose cataracts had left him navigating fields by memory, and a pregnant refugee, Amina, due in 6 weeks with no prior prenatal care. Their check-ins unfolded beneath the chandelier's glitter, unself-consciously normal, even mundane. Yet I felt tears threaten as nurses guided them toward intake desks. The building was working, breathing, alive. By noon, gala guests began to filter through security. Local teachers in Sunday best, hospital colleagues still in scrubs, state legislators, and a dozen formerly uninsured families whose testimonials would anchor the program. String quartet notes drifted from the atrium mezzanine. Servers circulated with trays of sparkling cider pressed from Willowbrook's orchards. I wove among clusters, greeting donors, clasping shoulders, drawing quiet breaths when eyes lingered too long on my face, still unused, perhaps, to admiration untainted by appraisal. When the clock struck 2, Maya signaled the start. Lights dimmed, a hush settled, and I stepped onto the stage beneath the chandelier, whose crystals now refracted a kaleidoscope of late-afternoon sun. My speech, memorized yet newly alive, unfolded in wide strokes, a story of a pocket watch once cracked and forsaken, of how time can wound but also mend, of community as the finest instrument in any surgeon's kit. I spoke of Samuel's surgery scheduled for next week, of Amina's birthing plan that honored her cultural rituals. I invoked every pledge note, wife waiting for chemo, daughter saved from asthma, until the air itself felt charged with their presence. Applause rose, wave upon wave, cresting when Damien, in a borrowed suit 2 sizes too big, bounded up to read a poem he had written, "My heart is a clock rewound." His mother wept openly. I steadied his trembling hand through the final stanza, the room quiet but for his confident 12-year-old voice and the soft click of camera shutters. Afterward, while guests toured wards and sampled greenhouse bruschetta made from the first rooftop tomatoes, I slipped outside to the terrace. There I found my parents. No entourage, no attorneys, just them, framed by blooming wisteria. Mother held a single basil seedling in a clay pot. Father carried nothing, hands open at his sides. Words did not leap forward immediately. Instead, we regarded the distant river, shimmering like spun glass. At last, Father cleared his throat. "We did not know how to give you what you needed," he said, each word measured as if aligned on a drafting table. "You built it yourself, and then multiplied it." Mother stepped closer, pressing the seedling into my arms. "For the greenhouse," she whispered. Eyes glistened, but pride had softened into something gentler. Humility, perhaps, or release. Acceptance is rarely thunderous. It often sounds like a quiet exhale. I nodded, cradling the pot, understanding that forgiveness travels in both directions, and that some reconciliations bloom slower than others. We walked back inside together, the basil's bright scent following like an anthem. By evening's end, pledge cards totaled another $3 million, but numbers felt almost irrelevant. What mattered was the steady procession of community members signing volunteer rosters, the laughter in hallways where fear once echoed, the easy way Samuel winked at me from his wheelchair as he was wheeled toward pre-op orientation. When the last guest departed and the quartet packed their instruments, I returned to the atrium alone. Overhead, night lights cast soft constellations where real stars shone beyond skylights. I thought of the watch, now encased in a museum in London, its tick forever part of another history. Here, heartbeat monitors pulsed in its stead. I ran a finger along the stage edge, grounding myself in the timber grain, and whispered a promise that the foundation would remain vigilant, adaptable, human. Outside, Willowbrook slept under a crescent moon. Inside, Amina's monitor beeped steady in the birthing suite. Samuel's pre-op vitals were logged by night staff humming along halls, and somewhere a janitor whistled off-key while polishing the terrazzo that caught the chandelier's reflection. Time, repurposed, had found new rhythm here. I headed toward the rooftop greenhouse, basil pot cradled to my chest, ready to tuck it into soil still warm from the day, trusting it would root, slowly, stubbornly, beautifully, in this house that worth rebuilt. Morning unrolled behind the gala like a soft bandage after surgery, revealing fresh skin still tender to the touch. I arrived at the clinic just after sunrise to find the atrium humming with its first true weekday pulse, Samuel's gurney gliding toward surgery, Amina sharing breakfast flatbread with a lactation nurse, and a cluster of night shift residents trading weary jokes by the coffee cart. The chandelier overhead no longer felt ceremonial. It was simply there, a steadfast constellation witnessing the ordinary miracles of intake forms and vital signs. At 9, Emily Rowan's follow-up essay went live, its headline bold across national syndicates. When time becomes medicine, a town heals itself. The piece threaded together photographs of Samuel's post-op smile, Amina's newborn heartbeat on the monitor, and the basil seedling now rooting in a rooftop planter. Donations spiked again, but more moving were the letters. A widower in Montana mailing 50 wrinkled dollars because hope traveled farther than grief. A second-grade class in Nairobi promising to plant matching basil as a sister garden. Yet triumph seldom walks alone. By midweek, a forensic accountant hired by an anonymous concerned party began fishing through subcontractor invoices, hinting at impropriety. Maya anticipated the angle. Marissa produced real-time ledgers so transparent they practically glowed. The probe fizzled, but not before reminding me that vision must be guarded as fiercely as it is shared. Meanwhile, the Foundation's true work deepened. A team of language mediators launched evening clinics for migrant farm hands whose coughs had gone untreated through 2 harvests. Damien, now officially cleared for sports, volunteered on weekends, wheeling magazines and optimism from room to room. Late one Thursday, I found him perched under a skylight, soldering wires for the robotics club, while Nurse Delgado practiced her English idioms beside him. I realized then that the building's architecture was less steel and stone than these unseen exchanges, each corridor a neural path sparking between strangers turned kin. At home, I unpacked the final vestige of my past, the graduation cap that had once felt like a prop in someone else's celebration. I framed it in simple oak and hung it opposite the gala portrait Emily had gifted me, my silhouette among tomatoes at dusk. Together, they bracketed the distance between a boy offered a cracked watch and a man stewarding a living heartbeat of a town. Toward the end of the week, Olivia phoned just to chat. No subtext coiled beneath her words. We spoke about her upcoming wedding, scaled down now to a lakeside ceremony where vows would carry across water rather than marble halls. She asked whether the clinic's greenhouse could supply herbs for the reception. I promised armfuls of basil and lavender, laughter catching us both by surprise. On Sunday evening, after the last visitor left and the janitor's off-key whistle faded down the stairwell, I climbed to the roof alone. The basil seedling from my mother stood taller, its small leaves unfurling toward moonlight. I pinched one, breathed its bright scent, and felt the quiet settle, an orchestral rest after a thunderous chord. Below, monitors beeped, elevators chimed, and somewhere Samuel practiced reading an eye chart with eyes newly clear. The town had found a new rhythm, and I, once relegated to background noise, had become a single note in its relentless song of going on. Summer settled over Willowbrook like a warm hand on a restless shoulder, and the clinic's rhythms deepened into something both sturdy and alive. By late June, we logged our 1,000th patient visit, celebrated with a sheet cake hastily frosted by the cafeteria staff and a chorus of off-key happy birthdays, even though the building itself was barely 2 months old. Laughter ricocheted down corridors once echo-quiet, and I found myself pausing mid-stride simply to listen. The clatter of meal trays, the murmur of interpreters bridging languages, the confident staccato of nurses' footsteps, each a metronome keeping time against the memory of that cracked watch now half a world away. Yet beneath the hum of progress, subtler currents stirred. A statewide health board invited the Bennett Health Foundation to join a pilot program on rural telecardiology, a project that could extend our reach beyond county lines, into hill towns where hospitals had shuttered and cell service came in ghostly blips. I flew to Hartford with Marissa and Elias, presenting data that glowed green on every metric. Reduced ER visits, improved prenatal outcomes, mental health no-show rates cut by half. Approval seemed certain, until a familiar surname appeared on the oversight committee roster. Lancaster, a distant cousin on my mother's side, long allied with my family's traditional philanthropic circles. During the Q&A, his questions carried razored politeness. Would our foundation's finances remain solvent? Could we scale without diluting quality? Beneath each syllable, I heard the old refrain. Who does he think he is? Maya's media instincts tingled. She advised transparency doubled with undeniable results. By week's end, we published a 30-page impact report, open source, downloadable by anyone with Wi-Fi or a library card. Community members shared the link like wildfire. Local farms printed hard copies and left them beside egg cartons at roadside stands. The message was unambiguous. Accountability need not fear sunlight. Back at the clinic, life's smaller miracles persisted. Amina delivered a healthy daughter, Zara. Beneath dimmable amber lights, the midwife singing a lullaby in Somali, while the rooftop greenhouse streamed birdsong through discreet speakers. Samuel returned one bright Tuesday for his final post-op check, reading the eye chart all the way to the bottom row, laughing until tears blurred the letters again. He pressed a single apple blossom into my palm. For luck, he said, though the luck seemed all his. Not all moments were flawless. A violent summer storm knocked out power to half the county, and our backup generator sputtered dangerously close to failure. Elias and a volunteer electrician named Carla worked through the night, rewiring circuits by flashlight until the dialysis wing thrummed safely back to life. Standing in the darkened atrium, watching their silhouettes bend over fuse boxes, I felt the fragile line between vision and vigilance, and understood anew that buildings, like people, stay alive only through constant tending. One evening, as the heat finally broke and night breezes ghosted through open windows, my father called. No lawyers, no preamble, just his voice, quieter than I remembered. He had read the impact report cover to cover, he said, and found himself proud in a way I hadn't earned. Silence settled between us like fresh snow. At length, he asked whether the foundation might accept an anonymous endowment for the telecardiology expansion. No strings, no naming rights. I agreed, equally wordless, knowing some bridges rebuild stone by stone in the hush after apology. Later I stood again on the roof, moonlight silvering basil leaves now lush enough to perfume the entire deck. Below, monitors beeped steady, and Zara's newborn cry rose, thin but insistent, claiming her place in the night's chorus. I realized then that the mansion my family once prized could never have offered this view. The sight of a town breathing easier because someone dared to measure worth in pulses and seedlings rather than square footage. The thought settled over me like the soft click of a pocket watch lid finally closing, not in dismissal, but in completion, its old tick-tock echoing forward as a heartbeat multiplied. Autumn arrived on tiptoe, brushing the willow leaves copper and lacing dawn air with cider sweetness. By the first week of October, the state board approved our telecardiology bid in a unanimous vote. Lancaster abstained, but did not obstruct, and a convoy of technicians rolled out from Willowbrook each morning, hoisting satellite dishes onto clinic, roofs in hamlets where payphones still rang more often than cell lines. To celebrate, the greenhouse yielded its first full basil harvest. Nurses bundled armfuls for patients to carry home, the corridors filling with bright green perfume that lingered long after visiting hours ended. I spent evenings drafting a letter for the museum in London that housed the pocket watch. After months of reflection, I wanted its placard updated, to note that proceeds from its sale had birthed a rural health network now serving 5 counties. The curator replied with delight, promising a new display engraved, an heirloom of healing, proof that time can be given back. The thought of tourists pausing before that cracked silver shell, considering the looping path from neglect to nurture, warmed me against October's chill. Life inside the clinic found its natural BPM. Samuel volunteered twice a week, guiding cataract patients through pre-op paperwork with patient empathy. Amina rocked Zara in the lactation lounge, sharing recipes for spiced tea with other new mothers. Damien's robotics club installed an automated seed watering rig in the greenhouse, and the janitor's off-key whistles evolved into surprisingly pleasant harmonies as he practiced after hours with the quartet's cellist. One brisk Friday, my parents visited unannounced. Father stood taller, lighter, as if a private burden had slipped from his shoulders. Mother carried a ledger. Her personal charity guild had voted to merge resources with the foundation's outreach pantry. There was no ceremony, just signatures beneath skylight glow and a soft handshake that felt at last like greeting rather than assessment. Later, we walked the river path where maple leaves twirled down like slow fireworks. Father paused beside the water, slipping something into my palm. A new pocket watch, forged from brushed titanium, face uncracked, hands unwavering. "Not a verdict," he said, voice steady. "A token of time well spent." The gift held no weight of expectation, only acknowledgement. I set it to the clinic's master clock, listening as its precise ticking aligned with distant monitor beeps, a quiet duet. Winter forecast whispers of heavy snow, but the generator now purred with redundant safeguards. The telecardiology pilot sent its first live echo scan from a village 70 miles north. The waveform arrived clear, a digital heartbeat crossing mountains in less than a breath. Volunteers planned a solstice lantern walk to fund pediatric dental vans, and Damien drafted a blueprint for solar-powered incubators, certain we could light 1,000 small suns where darkness once lived. On the roof that night, under Orion's ascending belt, I considered the road from worthlessness to worth woven into every brick below. How a family's careless slight became fuel for a community's endless engine. The basil rose, trimmed for winter, slept beneath straw, dreaming of spring. I closed the titanium watch with a soft click, pocketed its promise, and descended the stairwell toward the glow of the atrium where new arrivals waited, their stories just beginning to breathe inside these walls. Time, I realized, is not something we pass through. It is something we pass forward. And in Willowbrook, beneath chandeliers and seedling leaves, we had learned to keep it, not for ourselves, but for everyone still counting silent seconds in the dark, hoping to hear one clear, steady beat that says, "You matter, too."